Welcome back to today's video. Today we have a look at month 3 project management at the base practices. Let's start with the first base practice, which is define the scope of work. This is it. So we have to do this task or base practice, as it is called, but we have no idea how. Not quite. The text below, identify the project's goals, motivation, and boundaries, gives us a first hint on how we can achieve this base practice and the respective outcome and the information item scope of work, which you already know. Let's have a closer look. So we define the goals or objectives of the project. I like to use the following method with my clients. We travel together through time into the future, right after the planned end of the project. And then I ask my client, what do you see? Can you describe that, please? The intention is to describe the product, which is the result of the project, and its characteristics as detailed as possible. By looking right and left and up and down, one could describe the mood of the customer, the quality of the product, etc. And then by asking what is not there, one could answer the question of the constraints. All you have to do is to write the answer down in a structured way. But the question is, where do you document the objectives or goals? What ASPICE does not answer is in which document the scope of work shall be described. The information item, scope of work, can be part of any document. But there are some choices which are better than others. Two documents come into my mind. First, a project order, or project assignment, or project brief, whatever you call it. This is typically a shorter document describing the key data of a project, like goals and expectations, requirements, deliverables, milestones, phases, or budget. This document is very often signed by the internal sponsor of the project, which encourages the commitment of both the management and the team. And the project order is often created before the kickoff of the project. The second document in which the scope of work can be documented is the project handbook or project plan. What is this? This is a text document in Word or Confluence which fully describes the project with work packages, team allocation, interfaces, etc. And this handbook will most likely start with the definition of the scope of work. The relationship between the project handbook and the project order is that the project handbook refines the goals and expectations which are defined in the project order. The project handbook is created at the beginning of the project and maintained throughout the life cycle of the project. One last recommendation about the objectives. The SMART method has proven to be very useful and effective. In the advanced course, we will have a look at the project scope in much more detail, and we will discuss some practical examples. And let's continue with the second base practice, which is define project and life cycle. The life cycle is not a single level item, but it has to define different levels. Let's go through the levels step by step. First of all, it has to be defined in which overall sample phase your development project is running, A, B, C, D, etc. And then you have to define major project milestones for your project. And these major milestones have to be consistent with the customer milestones. Many customers define something they call PEP, Project Development Process, which defines major milestones on car development level. Of course, a development project at supplier side has to follow these milestones by answering two simple questions. First of all, at which customer milestone does your project start? And at which customer milestone does your project end? And for which customer milestones must the project deliver something? But the life cycle does not end here. The expectation is that the customer milestones are further refined with project milestones. This can be done by answering the following questions. What are the major releases which are delivered to the customer? For example, a hardware release, software releases, etc. These two domains typically have different release cycles. And what are the typical steps within the software release, like requirements, analysis, architecture, development, implementation, unit testing, integration, qualification, tests, etc. Sometimes even the time spans are defined for these steps within the software release, or phases, you can call them. For example, the first 2 weeks we spent on requirements analysis with a baseline which contains all valid and approved requirements, which are then handed over for the implementation and the testing in this release. The Scrum frequency can also be part of the lifecycle definition of the project according to this best practice. As you can see, the lifecycle definition can be quite complex. We will continue to sharpen your understanding in the advanced course. For the moment, that should be enough. Let's continue with base practice 3, evaluate feasibility of the project. Every project has only limited resources available. So the question which needs to be answered in a deliberate way is, can the goals be achieved with the resources available? Again, the describing text below guides us to how this shall be done and which aspects can be considered. The first question is the available time sufficient to develop the product or service? The second question is whether the available resources like money, infrastructure, even knowledge, information are enough to achieve the goals. And finally, the organization shall raise the question if the product can be technically be achieved. So both commercial as well as technical aspects are evaluated, and the result of the evaluation is documented in the information item feasibility analysis. Define and monitor work packages, base practice number 4. This is a big button. Let's start by defining what work packages are. They're not something small like activities or tasks, but they group activities together. This can actually be seen as a special kind of dependency between activities and work packages. Activities belong to work packages. Of course, work packages can have dependencies to other work packages on the same level. If one work package can only start if the results of the previous work packages are available, then this dependency shall be defined. This is mentioned here in the note. What is meant by according to the defined project life cycle? Or in other words, how do the life cycle and the work packages work together? As we have discussed before, the life cycle defines milestones. And in between the milestones are the phases of the project. And in these phases, the work packages are embedded. There can be, of course, several work packages in one phase. The work packages can be performed in parallel. This highly depends on the project's context. This structure of milestones, phases, work packages, which contain tasks or activities, is often called work breakdown structure, which is mentioned here in the note number 4. I see it something like a tree from the very abstract and big chunks of work down to something that can be completed by one person in a reasonable amount of time. Let's have a look at the outcomes step by step. Outcome number 3 is mentioned because the work packages contain activities, as we have seen before. And as we will see, both activities and work packages have to be sized or estimated by using a systematic approach or method. We will practice the application of estimation methods in the advanced course with example work packages. Why is the outcome number 4, interfaces, affected by work packages? Do you remember the definition of process from the bootcamp? The result of a process, or in this case work package, will be handed over to stakeholders waiting for them along the interfaces. These stakeholders can be other people inside or outside the project, other sub-projects, managers, customers, you name it. And let's continue with outcome number 5. Plans for the execution of the project are developed, implemented, and maintained. So we get another new word, plan. What is that? To me, a plan is just any document which is needed to execute the project, like the project plan, configuration management plan, a test plan, etc. But in this case, it is specifically the document containing the description of the work packages. Just a reminder, the work package can be described in a document called Project Plan or Project Handbook, which describes the entire project. Or the work packages can be contained in a specific document, which is then called schedule. We will discuss this later in base practice 8. Outcome number 7, adjustment. That is straightforward. The work packages, as they are defined by this base practice, are subject to adjustment when the project goals are not achieved. Sometimes new work packages are needed. Sometimes work packages may become obsolete. Others are changed. And this will lead to a new released version of the schedule or project plan containing the work package definition. And the last word I would like to highlight is monitor work packages. To me, this is quite easy. The work packages are ticked off as the project progresses. How this is done, we will discuss in the dedicated base practice number 8 for monitoring. base practice number 5. Define and monitor project estimates and resources. This is some kind of cross-cutting task. Estimating is somehow part of defining and monitoring work packages as defined in base practice 4, and it must be considered in base practice number 9, as the estimates must be consistent with the scope and the plans and the activities. But let's sort this base practice out. There are two stages or phases when this base practice plays a role. The first one is at the very beginning of the project, when the overall size of the project is estimated and documented. This estimate is based on the project goals, boundaries, and it defines the needed resources and is therefore the foundation for comparing it with the available resources, which is known as feasibility analysis, as we know. In this first phase, the method known as top-down estimate will be used to estimate the project in its entirety. And the second context where the estimation takes place is on the level of activities and work packages. This method on activity level is known as bottom-up approach, as the estimates on activity and work package level can be added up to the project level. The monitoring of this best practice is done by comparing the planned resource consumption with the actual consumption in regular intervals. We will learn more about estimation methods in the advanced course of this academy. Base practice number 6. Define and monitor required skills, knowledge, and experience. Again, this is a huge challenge for many organizations to get it right. A typical assessor question could be, how do you ensure that the people working in your project have the needed skills, knowledge, and experience? And the typical answer is, the line management takes care of that, and no evidence can be shown. So let's take this base practice step by step. The first step is to define what is needed by the project. So the project manager defines what level of experience is needed for each role. Then the project goes shopping for employees by asking the organization for suitable people. This is done by comparing the needed skills and knowledge and experience with the available skills and knowledge and experience. This can only be done if there's a way of measuring these aspects. And it's only possible if there's a documentation of the current state for each employee which might be working in a project. When comparing the requirements with the actual states, there will be gaps. So the next step will be to handle these gaps by defining and documenting actions or measures how to deal with these differences. These actions can include training, mentoring, and coaching, as it is mentioned in note number 8. These actions are typically agreed between the project and the line management or superior of the person. And in most cases, it is documented by the line management or sometimes by the human resource department. And then the loop has to be closed by tracking the progress of these actions in regular intervals and updating the current state of the skills. Again, this will most likely be done by the line management. As you can see, there are many options how to do competency management. So the first step is to have a clear concept of the documentation involved and the steps to perform within competency management. In the advanced course, we will discuss an example concept for competency management with you in much more detail. At the moment, this would go too far because I could talk about this base practice alone for hours. Just one further pointer before we move on. This base practice has a huge impact on level 2 and even on level 3 of ASPICE. So doing this base practice properly helps with higher levels of ASPICE. Base practice number 7. Define and monitor interfaces and agreed commitments. Again, this is a very important base practice as many projects have difficulties with implementing this in a pragmatic way. Let's start with a coaching slogan. As a computer scientist, I have learned to describe technical interfaces with sender, receiver, the format of the transmission, the content, and the interval, etc. I like to think of project interfaces just like technical interfaces, with the same aspects which need to be defined. Major difference is, of course, that the sender and receiver are people or roles. And the content is different, obviously. For project interfaces, information about the project is exchanged. For example, the project status or system requirements or any other work product which is created during the project's duration. And the format is defined as documents and their location. One aspect which is new in PAM 4.0 is the escalation mechanism. Let's have a look at this. What does this mean? This is the normal project escalation, not to be confused with the separate and independent quality assurance escalation path. First of all, this escalation mechanism is a special kind of project interface as information is exchanged. And the trigger for this escalation is that a commitment of a project interface is not fulfilled, which means that a result is not delivered in time or not delivered at all or not delivered in the expected quality. Base practice 8, define and monitor project schedule. The schedule is a list of planned activities, as we have seen. So it's the logical next step from the work breakdown structure as it was developed in base practice 4. The activities are then supplemented by the following information: start date, end date of the activity, effort, the results of the activity, or maybe sometimes called definition of done, dependencies to other activities, and assigned person or responsible person. This implicates that an activity can be carried out by one person within a reasonable amount of time. The set of activities with the above-mentioned information is called schedule, which contains the progress for each activity and will be updated if needed. Base practice 9. Ensure consistency. All the documents which are created by the project management must be synchronized to a consistent state. As there is a large number of these documents or plans, this is quite a challenge. Here are two approaches how to solve this. First, the milestone-based approach. Base practice 9, ensure consistency. All the documents which are created by the project management must be synchronized to a consistent state. As there is a large number of these documents or plans, this is quite a challenge. Here are two approaches how to solve this. First, the milestone-based approach. For this, a review is conducted before the milestone to check for consistency or to change the documents to create consistency. The second approach is to check for certain dependencies on a weekly or monthly basis. For example, the consistency between the customer milestones and the project schedule could be checked in a weekly meeting. Both of these approaches are regular in the sense of this best practice. Best practice number 10, review and report progress of the project. This again involves two steps. The first step is to collect the needed information about the progress of the project. This can be done by looking at the activities in the schedule and their progress state, or by asking the project members and collecting their data. This is the inner side of the reporting within the project. Then this data is usually aggregated and reported to stakeholders outside of the project, to management as it is called in note number 11. The intervals of internal reporting from team members to the project management and of the external reporting from the project to the higher management must be defined, but they can be different. While the sampling rate of the progress within the project should be sufficiently high, reporting to the management can be in larger intervals. This concludes the video on the base practices of monthly project management. Take care and see you in the next one.